Thanks for being with us for the September, oh my goodness, September Family Support Webinar. We have with us tonight Patrice Carroll from Latham Centers. Patrice serves as their PWS manager at Latham. Is that your
Director of PWS services? Yep.
Yes. So welcome. I'm going to hand it over to you to take it from here.
Wonderful. Thanks. Thanks for being here, everyone. This is a really hot topic and people have a lot of questions about it and a lot of feelings about it. So we are going to jump right into the PowerPoint. I am probably going to talk for about 25 minutes or so, and then we are going to turn it over to see what people have questions about and what people would like to talk more about. Hold on one second. I opened the wrong PowerPoint, so just bear with me 1 second. Let's see, here we go. That's the right one.
Patrice, just a quick question.
Yes.
Folks have their adult child with PWS join them for this? Or would you prefer we?
You know what? I think it's fine. I
Okay.
think it's okay. Yep, I think it's okay. And if it starts to not be okay, then you can either just send me a quick chat to say, back it up or stop talking about what you're talking about. And we can modify. That's perfectly fine. But I actually am curious about what the adult individuals with PWS want to hear more about and what questions they have. So I'm perfectly fine with that happening.
All right, great. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so here's kind of the key question that we're basing all of this off of. Healthy relationships are a key factor in living a quality of life, and we're going to talk about what that means in a second. Disruptions in appropriate social skills, cognitive impairments, and challenges in day-to-day living can impact a person's ability to form and keep relationships. Is a person less deserving of meaningful relationships simply because they need more support in creating and keeping them? Or should we, as families and caregivers, work to create an environment where relationship skills can be learned and improved upon with practice and support? So that's kind of what we're basing our core belief off of, is that we believe that people with PWS have the right to experience being in a relationship just like anybody else. So that's kind of what we're working with. And this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk a little bit about friendships, dating, and then intimate partners. And those are really the types of the relationships that we're going to talk about. So what gets in the way? What gets in the way of this? We make assumptions that people with PWS come to the table with the same set of skills that we do, and they don't. And it's unfair of us to make that assumption. So here are some of the things that can get in the way of a person with PWS being in a healthy relationship. The first one is executive functioning disorder. I'm not going to spend tons of time on this because you guys have all heard me talk about these things before, but I do think it's important that we hit on these with the understanding that the person with PWS will need some more support than a neurotypical person would. So executive functioning disorder. This is executive functioning are all the skills that you need to complete a task, any task, getting ready for work, all the way to planning a wedding and everything in between. It's a set of skills that you need to be able to be flexible, to make changes if something goes wrong, to communicate clearly, to understand what comes next in a sequence. If you're trying to do something, you do this before this, and then that comes afterwards. All of those things are things that people with PWS really, really struggle with, and they need extra support around these things. So this is why a person with PWS may have a really difficult time completing a task, especially if there's heightened moments of stress. So this is something that certainly needs our compassion and our support, but it also needs, we also need to have a really clear understanding of the person with PWS's brain and the fact that they're not choosing to not know how to do these things. This is something organically that they struggle with and that they need our help, extra help, especially when things are stressful. Sensory processing disorder, again, you guys have heard me talk about this a million times, but the key takeaway for sensory processing disorder is it can be really difficult for the person with PWS to tell somebody how they're feeling, whether it's physical or emotional. So communicating discomfort is a very, very difficult thing for the person with PWS to do. And so what ends up happening is they show us how they feel instead of telling us how they feel. We know there's issues with impulse control. Everybody has inappropriate thoughts. What if I close my eyes while I'm driving down the highway? You know, things like that that just kind of pass in your brain and then you don't act on them because we have pretty good impulse control. People with PWS struggle with impulse control, and it's that imp of the mind. That's what it's called. It's the imp of the mind. When you have an inappropriate thought, they can act on those sometimes. So a lot of talking and teaching and supporting ahead of time is really the key to making sure that you have an individual who can be in a healthy relationship while being able to ignore that imp of the mind. Theory of mind, this is a developmental process that usually starts around age 3 or 4. And it's the basic understanding that other people have different beliefs and feelings and experiences than you do. So having an immature theory of mind, and it seems as though a lot of people with PWS do, it is very difficult for them to see another person's perspective. Sometimes we call that egocentric or selfish, or they only care about themselves. Again, this isn't a choice. This is the way the brain of the person with PWS works. They're not choosing to not understand or care about how someone else feels. They truly don't have the ability, as much as a neurotypical person does, to understand another person's experiences. So imagine being successful at work, being successful in a relationship, having friendships, and having all of these things get in the way. So that's what I meant by we make an assumption that people come to the table with the same set of skills that we do. They don't, and we need to be very, very mindful about the fact that these are things that they're struggling with, and these are key components of being in a healthy relationship. So they really need our support around this. Okay, so what is a quality of life? The universal definition of a quality of life is meaningful work, meaningful relationships, and leisure of your choice. If you have all of those things, you have a good quality of life. What's important about this is that the word meaningful is very, very personal. What I consider meaningful work and meaningful relationships isn't necessarily what Stacy considers meaningful work and meaningful relationships. That word meaningful is extremely important because as we start to talk about about relationships with the person with PWS, we need to make sure that we have a really good understanding of what their definition of meaningful is. And these conversations can and should start long before they're interested in being in a relationship. So what's our role? Our role is to support the person's needs and wants. It's to arrange for access to opportunities. True inclusivity is when the relationship starts organically, but that can only happen after the initial work is done. So have your child do presentations at school about what PWS is and then who they are as a person. Arrange for you to do a presentation on what PWS is at a PTA meeting, or with the soccer moms or with the Boy or Girl Scouts. Having these conversations ahead of time will give the other kids and the other families an opportunity to embrace your child. Whereas if they're meeting them and don't have an understanding of what the syndrome is, they may be really confused about behaviors, about things that your child is saying, about accommodations that your child needs. If you're able to have those conversations up front, it is much more likely that your child will be embraced in whatever community that you're in. We want to facilitate relationships when they form and teach skills. So teaching consent, very, very important. Teaching conflict resolution, teaching what is acceptable and what isn't, especially online. Having conversations about the fact that it's illegal to send pictures of your body parts on the cell phone before they get the cell phone. So all of these things that we might just assume are known, assume they're not known. Making sure that you have a really good understanding of what's happening on the cell phone if your child has one. There are dozens of apps that can help you with this, that can track who they're talking to, that you can put parental locks in place for local restaurants or Uber Eats, all those things that they might be getting into, chat rooms that you don't want them on. There are apps that can make sure that you know what's happening on the phone, or on their laptop. So you just want to make sure that you have those things in place if you have concerns about what's happening online. Understand the dignity of risk. So we want to make sure that we're not blocking relationships forming, that we're not here to say that a person can't be in an intimate relationship with someone else. We just want to make sure that the person has the information and that they are in a safe and consensual relationship. And then we intervene as necessary. So I'm going to tell this story because it's my favorite story ever, even though some of you have heard this 1 million times. We want to make sure that we understand what the person is asking for. So I'll tell you a story about a young man that I was working with several years ago. He was dating his girlfriend and he said that they wanted to have sex. He wanted to have sex with his girlfriend. So we started working with him around what consent meant. And there's a whole program around being in a sexual relationship. And when we started kind of getting into the details of it, he was really surprised about what we were talking about. So I said, it seems like we're talking about two different things here. Can you tell me, you're saying that you want to have sex with your girlfriend. Can you tell me what that means? And he said, oh, yeah, definitely. You get a hotel room, you order a pizza, and you lay in bed and watch a movie. And that was his understanding of sex. So when we started talking about intercourse, he was horrified because he wasn't talking about that. Before you start training and teaching and talking about things, just make sure that you know what they're asking for. But that's kind of the lesson learned from that. So here is a story that is about 15 years ago. I got a call from a mom, and I'm going to read this to you, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit. This is a true story. Celia became fixated on a peer in her school and stalked him in person, by phone, and on social media. She was 15 years old. She lost interest in her favorite activities and did nothing but focus on where he was, what he was doing, and who he was spending time with. She would text and email girls that he spent time with and threaten to kill them and burn their houses down. So this was getting pretty bad. She would stand on his lawn and yell for him to come outside. Soon she began throwing objects at his house and windows when he did not respond. We arranged a meeting between Celia and her peer, and social workers and her family were present. We met with the peer ahead of time and helped him with the script. This was similar to an intervention. He told her clearly that he was not interested in a relationship with her, and that if she stopped stalking him, he would agree to still say hi to her when they passed each other in the hall. He explained that if she did not stop, then he would not like her and he would never say hi to her again. Celia continued, and her peer stopped saying hi, causing an escalation of behaviors at school and at home. So mom was pretty upset, obviously. This had turned into really criminal activity at this point. So mom could have done a few different things. She could have tried taking away favorite things, putting a lot of blocks in place. It probably would have still continued. She could have moved her out of that school. chances are Celia probably would have started doing this with another boy. But what mom did is what ultimately fixed this whole situation. First thing she did was she got curious about what unmet need Celia had. What was Celia looking for? These behaviors were screaming that she needed something that she wasn't getting. And as it turns out, Celia wanted what most 15-year-old girls want. She wanted a typical high school experience of falling in love and having a boyfriend. And then what mom did, probably the best thing that she did, was she reached out to her community. And a lot of times when our kids have extreme behaviors, we tend to keep it to ourselves because it's embarrassing and no one else is talking about it. So the assumption is no one else is doing it. I promise you, if your child is doing something, no matter how extreme it is, someone else's child is doing it. And if we can normalize talking about that instead of kind of staying in this social media, everything is perfect, there's nothing going wrong in our lives, you're going to start feeling a lot less isolated and you're going to start having a lot more support. So this is exactly what happened. Mom reached out to her community and met another mom whose son was having similar behaviors. And they got them together. And it was love at first sight. And they are still dating 15 years later. And Celia never even looked twice at that boy in school again, because it was never about that boy. It was about her being in a relationship, wanting to be in love, wanting to have somebody. And what's important is going back to that word meaningful. Understand that there are so many different kinds of relationships, and it doesn't matter what's meaningful to you. That doesn't matter. Your definition of a relationship doesn't matter. It's your child's definition of a relationship. So I know so many individuals who have boyfriends and girlfriends. They only see each other at conferences, and that's fine. That's how they want it. I know other individuals who are living together and have had commitment ceremonies. The only reason they didn't get married is because it would have affected their benefits, which is ridiculous, but they had a commitment ceremony. So, and all sorts of relationships in between. So a number of different ways that you can achieve this unmet need. Just make sure that you know what their definition of relationship is. So here are some of the takeaways, and then we're going to open this up for questions. Act out of a mindset of inclusion and opportunity. So make sure that at any opportunity you have to make sure that your child is included in the local community, in the greater community, in the school community, anytime that there's an opportunity, because the more visible they are, the more people get to know them, the more likely they are to be able to make organic relationships within their community. Again, be curious about the unmet needs. This is a really big one. Because all behavior is communication. They're trying to tell you something. So make sure you stay really curious about what they're trying to say. And again, your definition of a relationship is not universal.